shouldn't LGBTQIA plus be enough? And not necessarily. As Kanaka, it's not enough for us, I think. The LGBTQIA plus community, while we're allies in many ways and shared experiences, I've known in my experience in my life, it's not always a safe space for Indigenous peoples or people of color in general.
Yep.
And so Kumuhina and her reflections, I think coming from her experience also helps us to better grasp that our relationalities and our sexuality, right, comes from a very different genealogy of thought, rooted in the Pacific and thousands of years old, right? It's not something that came around and started to be sort of institutionalized in the 17 and 1800s and then named and then demonized. It comes from a very different genealogy of sexuality and relationality. So that's important to make that distinction. Otherwise, again, like I said, we lose the nuance of it all.
This episode engages Hawaiian worldviews in social contexts and explores themes of sexuality, gender, and erotics. Some language and content may be considered strong or triggering. Viewer and listener discretion is advised.
Aloha mai kākou and welcome to Kūkā Kīkī, a Māhūi-led podcast where we kūkā and kiki about Kanaka sexuality, gender, erotics, and all things Māhū. This is a gathering of friends and community rooted in connection, joy, and resilience. Today, it's just us squirrel friends, Kaimi and Ākea, to introduce this podcast. In this Kūkā Kīkī, we share stories of our upbringing, how our ohana and kupuna shaped our lives, and what it meant to be recognized as Māhū from an early age. We also reflect on kuleana, care, and mo'okuauhau, and talk about why creating this Kūkā Kīkī space for honest, nuanced conversations is vital for our Pacifica queered community. Aloha, Ākea.
Aloha e Kaʻimi. That's so formal. Here we are.
Here we are.
Welcome to Kūkā Kīkī. Kūkā Kīkī. Kiki Kūkā. Here we are.
Here we go.
So we're starting off this podcast to really talk about a lot of things, but all things Māhū.
Aye.
And we're learning along the way. We'll get into the history of what we've been doing with this podcast, but it's important for us to ho'olauna as Kānaka, and to center the aina that we come from, and the people that shape us. And so we start every episode doing that, and we'd be remiss not to ask you, the host.
Oh, wow.
You know, nā wai ke kupu o oi, no hea mai oi. Bring us all the tea about the aina and the people that make Kaʻimi.
So I'm born on Oahu. But I was raised in Manoa Valley I was raised all over the place. I mean, my mom was she took us i'o iane'i. But for a good portion of my life, I was raised in Manoa on the land known as Paradise Park, right below Kamua Va'a in Manoa.
Oh,
yes, I should bring
she knows.
Inoa ili aina here, yeah. So I was raised there in a little tin shack with my mom and my brother, and we took care of the birds up there at Paradise Park after the park had closed in '94. And we were there for, I would say, about 3 or 4 years until we couldn't squat there anymore, and then we dashed to Waianae.
Yep. And
I lived with my auntie folks in Waianae for years and spent a lot of time with my tutu, or my grandmother. So, you know, Manoa is it's aina ma'e, it's very uli. There's lots of mea kanu Hawaii and mea kanu haole as well. There are a lot of animals, a lot of uhane, so it's kind of mysterious and mystic. So I feel spooky.
Yes.
So I feel like a lot of that has influenced kind of the way I see the world. I love the idea of opacity and not being somebody who you can just read right away. I like having sort of a mysteriousness or an air of mystery around.
Listeners, he's an Aquarius, just so you know. Very, can't figure it out. Yeah.
So, you know, it was a very formative for my upbringing. And then, you know, my grandmother and my aunt were both instrumental in raising me. My aunt from when I was really little, and then my grandmother in my teen years, and then in my 20s, you know, continuing to hanai. And yeah, it was, in a sense, you know, my family always recognized me as Māhū growing up since I was very little. And that was never an issue with my family. They're very much in the old Hawaiian way, accepted me as I am, and they still do. And
did they use that word specifically?
Yes. They did use that word specifically, yeah. My auntie Kai, shout out to Auntie Kai, would call me her little Māhū, or her
Pilila'au Park.
Or my little Māhū is what she would call me growing up. And it wasn't, I never took it, you know.
It wasn't like a weaponized
No, it wasn't weaponized,
thing.
no. It was very endearing and loving. So growing up, you know, as being Māhū, you are raised in a different way in your family. You're not, like as Kumuhina talked about similarly, and even Tati and Coco, you're not doing the same things that the other members of the ohana are doing. In fact, you do sit at the feet of your grandparents, and you do ho'olohe pono I ka lākou mea I ōlelo ai.
Because you have the capacity as Māhū to do those things.
I guess so, yeah.
I mean, and just knowing you as your partner, but like, for example, your brother, Ki'o, shout out to Ki'o. His dynamic with the family is very much different.
Yeah,
right?
Very, very
He's
different.
Expected to have a wahine.
And keiki.
And do his career. And he has Kiki, and they're beautiful daughters, right? But you, being with mom.
I was expected to be a caregiver.
Yeah, and grandma was like, oh, you're going to cook, you're going to clean. Yep. You have the capacity to actually listen and ho'oko and do all of those things.
Yes, yeah.
Where your other siblings, cousins, are like, they have to focus on other things. And that's no detriment to themselves.
No, I mean, it's a kuleana and you just accept it. But it's also an honor too. And the other side of the word kuleana, there is an honor to having that, you know, not kulana, but that relationship with your ohana, right?
In a sense, like the cost of intimacy with your makua and kupuna is the kuleana and the duty you have to make sure things are set at the duty.
The duty.
Not the duty, but the duty. It's very Mulan.
It's very that.
So yeah, like cost of having that pilina equals the kuleana to actually do all of these things.
Yes.
So some people, I feel like they want the intimacy, they want the pilina with someone to be close to them, without having to do the kuleana to get to
without having to do the work.
No, but you're saying, right, in order to be close to mom, in order to be close to grandma, you had to actually malama in ways that you only could do.
Absolutely, and I was fortunate to be able to kind of, with my grandmother, she grew up, you know, during the Depression, World War II. She was born in 1925. Kauai, from Kealia. Well, Kapa'a.
Yep.
But the ohana comes from Kealia. Yes. And she was a woman who didn't speak very much, unless she was scolding you, really. She was very o'ole'a. And my time with her, I got to kind of peel back some of the layers and learn about her, what she remembers of her mother, which was a very tough topic to talk about because her mother passed when she was 12, or 11 or 12 from tuberculosis. Then she was put into foster homes. And so my grandmother didn't have many memories of her mother, but what she did share with me. And it was really, really special because I got to see the generational relationship. You know, my mother was a lot like her mother, which is why they had such a strong pilina. Musicians. They love their alcoholic beverages.
Free spirit.
Yeah, the free spirit.
Yes.
They both
and you
smoked.
are your mother's daughter as well.
I am my mother's daughter.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was, you know, it was really special to be able to have that time with my grandmother, especially toward the tail end of her life. You know, we did a lot together, from cooking to cleaning to, well, she always wanted to do the laundry. She said I couldn't do it properly, so she would do the laundry, and then we'd take care of all 36 of her cats.
Yeah.
And it was, and mom, and that was our life revolved around taking care of my mom, who had dementia, alcohol onset dementia. She passed away in November.
Love you, Mom.
So yeah, love you, Mom. But that our life revolved around the care of someone else. So I really learned through my grandmother patience, but also prioritizing the care of someone who is vulnerable and what that's like. Putting aside, making sacrifices, but always coming from a place of aloha, which as we've talked about before, aloha is not always just a happy thing.
No,
aloha
rainbows.
hurts,
Yep.
as well. So so that's a little bit about my upbringing, and now I'm a PhD student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa in the Department of Political Science, studying Indigenous politics. So another person there who shaped me is Kumu Noinoi Silva, who is a mentor to me.
Shout out Kumu.
Shout out Kumu, mahalo. I've had the unique opportunity to study Olelo Hawaii with her. Reading Nupepa, Mo'olelo together. We have a hui helu that gets together once in a while. We read Hi'iaka, Hamanalo, Kamakau. We read all kind. And so it's really, really nice, to have that relationship with a kumu who also accepts me as I am and who's extremely patient with me.
Yeah.
I think how I am today is it's a reflection of all of these relationships that I've developed over the years.
Yes.
And they continue to shape who I am and who I will become. So I'm extremely grateful. Well, let me turn over the question to you, Kea.
Yeah, listeners, Kaimi doesn't like too much attention on him, but yeah. Me, so Aloha, ova o Ākea. Should I in Olelo Makuahine or what's the vibe? O ka ohana, ma ka au ko'u makuahine no ka ava o ahu mai lākou o Aveau. O ko'u kupuna kane kua kolu o ia ke konohiki hope loa o kela aina. And kaulana o ka ava I ka nalu e a'ai I ke kuahiwi.
Oh yeah.
No leila o ka aikai ma leila nui kona kolo ana mai kai a I uka. And then, so shout out to Aveaus, all the Aveaus over here. And o ka ohana ma ka au makua kane o kahikina me ke li'ipule ole no hamakua mai lako ma ka moko ke ave ma ninole me honohina. We got to go and do that.
Wahele maua I leila nani loa.
Nani. So, yeah. Ka pali waka waka. Kaulana o hamakui ka pali waka waka. Jagged hoi.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And yeah. Kela ko'u mau kupuna, they're with me in different ways. And I'm always looking for signs to say, are they here? Are they not? I'm still trying to figure that out. But, I think going into Olelo, you try to figure out your kupuna that were manaleo. Like, show me something. Like, I'm trying to connect and speak with you. And I think they show things in ways that we might not understand when we first see it.
Yeah.
But afterwards, you're like, oh, got it. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's my the kupu. Yeah, ova ke kupu na lako. And then I grew up in Honouliuli, artist formerly known as Eva Beach, but still known as, but call it One'ula is Haubush. Shout out to Haubush. Honouliuli, Eva Beach. Also grew up in Kuli'o'o, Kawei and yeah, and here we are.
So what about people who have shaped you? Anyone
that's a great question. Yeah. So I would actually summon her. Evoke, perhaps. I'm going to say my dad.
Oh.
Yeah, shout out to Mr. Casey over there. In the way that growing up as someone who was already showing a lot of femininity, though kane presenting, his biggest fear was in a world where people are not understanding queerness, this kind of like mahu, in a world that mahu is weaponized as a word. He's very don't be a sissy boy, right? Yeah. Don't be this, don't be that. And coming now into my now in my 30s, it's like understanding he's trying to just equip me with the things so that I can navigate both worlds.
With the limited knowledge that he had about
that,
Māhū.
yeah, and then being 5 years old, and you're like, but I wanted My Little Pony.
Yeah.
Like that was like my main thing. My Little Pony. I want My Little Mermaid Barbie. You know, I'm like, Dad, can I get it? He's like, no. You know, like I get it. He kind of calls it like when you're making a sword, you gotta like put in the heat, and then you gotta cool it off with the water, right? Weapons of war and identity not really hitting here, but I'm talking about that because maybe listeners out there, you have the same kind of relationship with people in your family who are trying to like kind of make sure you're palatable or sensible to the hetero world. Hate, double hate, loathe entirely. But I appreciate at least him doing the best that he could and seeing like me being able to at least code switch to, hey, sup, brada, and do the man shake and you go on the shuttle at the airport and give the tip with the I try to teach that to you, and you're like,
he tried to teach me how to do the tip thing with the man shake. I don't do that. I hug and kiss, babe.
You're like, hi, thank you, here's your tab.
Yeah, it's very that.
Which is fine. Is fine. But I'm starting to unpack.
Not the nasal voice.
Yeah, no, you don't sound like that. You don't sound like that. But in my dad's like thinking, he thinks we're like just
glitter guns.
He's like, don't put the glitter guns, you know, like be men about it. And so that really shaped how I think of myself, being able to like, we call it mask, right? Like just butch it up and be like, hey, sup, cuz, and all that. But that really destroys any kind of complexity, nuance about that we can be both kane and have hine aspects to us that don't have to compete and don't have to be comfortable for anybody else. Right? So my existence should be about my contribution to Lahui, not about people who have their own weird things about just being Māhū. I'm not here to make you comfortable. I'm here to contribute.
Right.
So get out of your mind, like I'm here to show up and do the work. Huli kalima ilalo. Aole me ke kuhi anai, you know, whatever. So yeah, my dad. But the opposite side, my mom has been super supportive. And I feel like they both knew at a very young age, but Māhū was never a word I grew up with, unless at elementary days.
So do you consider yourself Māhū then?
You know, I struggle with that because people call me that when you're young, you know, as a
weapon, a slur.
So I feel like a lot of people are taking it and just using it as a source of power. But through your research, through my research, we're starting to figure out that Māhū has such a nuanced usage in terms of how our kupuna used it. So am I going to call myself that because the people who call me that come from a place of ignorance? Maybe, just to kind of like renormalize and say like, yeah, you try to like spear, but it's just he vai au. You know, what is that? But basically when the reign of spears became vai au to kamehameha. Just like
yeah,
ooh, I'm just I'm good.
With
like,
his Wonder Woman bangles.
Yeah. Anyway, so I do consider myself that, just to be a me'e for people who feel like shame about it, and just like claim it, you know. But what listeners' preview of Kumuhina's episode is that there's kind of a nuance to Māhū where no two Māhū are the same.
Yeah.
And the purpose of even the word Māhūi, and we'll get to that later, but same with Kanaka. Even though we are Lahui, one Kanaka to the next is very different. Their ku'oho, their values, their politics. That's the consequence of calling us one community. One people, one this, one that, right? That means that we have one shared something, one shared politic, one shared outlook. It's not always the case at all.
Right, which is not necessarily conducive to a healthy Lahui.
No, we need to Kūkā.
Yeah.
We need to Kīkī.
And have disagreements, but be able to have disagreements about what is what in a civil manner.
Yep. Totally.
Be able to disagree without insulting somebody else.
Absolutely.
And then always coming from a place of ike, and bringing that ike kupuna into the conversation, which takes a certain literacy, I think, in ike Hawaii. And, of course, we can't blame people for not having that literacy just because the complex histories of colonialism, settler colonialism here in Hawaii, that has completely dismantled our pedagogical relationships through the generations, right?
Yes.
So, I also recognize that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of getting people onto kind of similar playing fields in order to hold papa in a way that is, generative.
Papa, mai, papa, aku, all the things. I think that's a good segue into why this podcast exists. So we're trying to do some of the healing work into at least get out to the lahui, conversations with people that look like you, talk like you, kind of have the same experiences, for us to be at a place now where we can articulate why things are the way they are. For us as young Māhū, or being, kind of ostracized in our own community, to be able to just say like, oh, okay, there's just a toolbox to pull from and say, got it. There are words that we can use. There are things that, I can commiserate and be like, yeah, girl, that happened to me too, right? When you have that community, even if it's parasocial, you can at least say, okay, there's a place you can tune into to feel like, I'm seen. And it's not always the case in Kanaka spaces, in queer spaces, pride. We'll get to that, but so should we talk about the origin?
Yeah, let's talk about the origin.
Kūkā Kīkī, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start.
Yeah, please.
So the origin of Kūkā Kīkī started with Laho'iho'i'ea.
It did.
Originally, it was kind of a talk back to some homophobic comments that were made at the university, well, transphobic, queerphobic in general.
Yes.
And we felt that it was our duty to respond to that, just because, as Tatiana talked about, when someone is expressing, ignorance, but also some hatred, vitriol, it's important to confront them right there versus letting them go with that. You got to stand up to people.
Yeah, can't enable it.
No, especially when they're hurting members of your community. Right. So we came back with Kūkā Kīkī to try to create a space of education, right? To literally
not blame.
Right, not blame.
Not trying to fight.
No, because we're assuming that this person just didn't have the tools in the toolbox to really express what they were trying to say. Yeah. Which wasn't coming from a place of, it just came out through the language of homophobia. So we had a few panel members, one of them being Coco Chandelier, who's been with us since the very beginning doing these conversations.
Yes.
And I, was really well received. I think people are hungry for ike around Māhū experiences, the queer Kanaka experience, what that is like. And then moving on, throughout the years, we were invited by Laho'iho'i'ea to come, and so that was before Laho'iho'i'ea. They were invited by my kumu Noela Nikudir Ka'opua to participate in Laho'iho'i'ea and have a panel. And so we did a few Zoom panels.
We did during the pandemic.
During the panini. And those were really also well received, and again, people were showing that they were hungry for this. And then we had a really nice one at Kawaiwai. It was nice and it was large.
We learned a lot.
We learned a lot with that one. That was a great experience. A lot of community came out, and I think that one was really interesting too, because there were some. Even with our panelists, which we aloha them, but there was some misinformation that
myths around
Māhū that I think came up in that conversation, which pushed us to think about, okay, how can we make this even better, right?
Sure.
How can we demystify?
Absolutely.
It's important as people to be opaque, but also there are sections of that. Of our being that also needs to be demystified a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So I think that was kind of the the sort of impetus for starting this podcast. And so, our dear friend Maile Barrett, like mahalo, was the one who, was like, hey, do you remember that idea? We should create a podcast.
Yep.
I think, it would be really viable and people would be really interested in sort of organizing around, this idea of Kūkā and Kīkī, right? Yep. And so we thought it would be Pono to start off with, the Hūlili special issue, which will be coming out when, Director?
When you're listening. Oh, yeah, by the way, Director of Publishing here. So right now, we're working on it, but we're hoping to time it with Honolulu/Hawaii Pride, along with this podcast, so that we can talk about, right, things that are happening in our Lāhui in juxtaposition to Pride, and then going through La Ku'oko'a to, again, talk about Ea and how we can embody Ea. And that's how it all started with La Hoi Ea.
So we're really excited about this special issue because there's nothing like it before.
Yep,
and of course, like those of us who are interested in Hawaii politics, but also like queer politics in general, indigenous queer politics.
Yes.
I think, this issue is coming at a time where, we need more material.
Yeah.
We absolutely need more material. And there are scholars, community members out there who are makaukau for that hana.
Absolutely.
So the special issue is really important, no ka pono o ka Māhūi, because it is laying I think a foundation to have conversations about gender, sexuality, erotics, and understandings of what Mahu is.
And especially in I would say, a very powerful American and Judeo-Christian community, that conversations around this are kind of very hush-hush, and we're finally being able to bring it out in juxtaposition, in concurrence, if you will, to all the craziness that's happening politically.
Yeah.
We can't just let it go by and be hush-hush anymore.
Yeah.
It's time to have conversations that we can be clear, right? So again, this first season is about talking about that special issue, the people that have contributed, and talking about the work. Because again, it's one thing to read someone's article, but to actually see them or hear their voice and talk about, what shapes their perspective.
And not everyone has time to read either.
No, not at all.
So that's, I think, being able to listen on your car ride to school, dropping off your keiki in the shower, whatever, mea.
Yeah.
You can access this.
For me especially, I'm in publishing, but I would rather listen.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own style.
Yeah.
And we're here to, if you like visual, we're here. And if you like audio, you can ho'olono I ka leo o ke kahuli, and enjoy. So yeah, it started with La Hoi, and we talked a little bit about what we're going to be doing. So this whole season is about the people that have contributed. And you have a very special one coming up. So one of the episodes is where Ka'imi, as our host, is going to be talking with Kumuhina about the oral history.
Yeah.
And with Kumuhina and her upbringing, what shapes her perspectives.
Thank you for asking about the oral history. That's a project I'm really excited about, because we often know Kumuhina in one way. The one way she presents herself in politics, in the media.
Yep.
Her kuleana is very clear. But, there is another side to Hina that I think that, people may have misunderstood. So I think this oral history will give clarity and context to her upbringing, which I think is super important, her formative years. What gave rise to Kumuhina, who gave rise to Kumuhina. And I use the metaphor of the Paiki'i cloud formation that comes from the horizon and then hugs the Palilaumania. And each pai opua, if you will, or each opua represents a facet of the Lemuana that comes from the ocean that adorns Hina, the cliff that stands alone and majestic, if you will, only because it is a very lonely path in many ways to be a leader.
It is very lonely.
And, these clouds represent sort of, each person that has contributed to her upbringing, and she talks about her ohana, her kupuna. She talks about mentors in her life. So I think this will be a really interesting oral history juxtaposed to this ike I gained from Buke Kilo Kilo Ao Pua, which is in the Poi Poi collection, around clouds and their meaning. And each pauku in the oral history has a cloud name, a footnote with the meaning behind that cloud name to kind of go along with her story. But Hina has also challenged us to really think about this word queer, to think about critically about our relationship to the LGBTQIA plus community.
Yes.
Which I think because of our relationship, our close proximity to colonial structures, we have been sort of enclosed within as queered Kanaka into the LGBTQIA plus umbrella. But what we're starting to understand, and as we dig deeper into the archive and look at the ways our kupuna thought about the world, it's more nuanced, right? Things around aikane, mahu, punalua, po'olua, these relationalities of our ancestors, the pilina that they had, the context that drove that pilina is very, very, very different. And a lot of us are reconnecting to those histories, and recognizing perhaps the problematic thinking around trying to enclose an indigenous people in a Western framework that does not recognize their unique traditions and their unique relationalities. Instead, sort of ascribes and queers them in a way that doesn't really leave room to have conversations that are more nuanced. And some may take it in a not so great way that we're trying to connect in this way. Shouldn't LGBTQIA plus be enough? And not necessarily as Kanaka. It's not enough for us. I think it's not always the LGBTQIA plus community. While we're allies in many ways, and shared experiences. I've known in my experience in my life, it's not always a safe space for indigenous peoples or people of color in general. And so, Kumuhina and her reflections, I think coming from her experience also helps us to better grasp that our relationalities and our sexuality, right, comes from a very different genealogy of thought. Rooted in the Pacific and thousands of years old, right? It's not something that came around in, and started to be sort of institutionalized in the 17 and 1800s, and then named and then demonized, along with women. It comes from a very different genealogy of sexuality and relationality. So that's important to make that distinction. Otherwise, again, like I said, we lose the nuance of it all.
And I think you've really helped me see that. Coming from an upbringing where queerness is never discussed, I have no queer Māhūi parental figures or elders that I know of. And going to an American institution in Florida, none of those kind of nuances are ever talked about. I never once said the word indigenous. Coming back and learning from sentiments that you articulate, Kumuhina articulates, I realized that the word queer, at least in our understanding of it being against the grain, against the norm, against the whatever it is, when we call ourselves queer in a Kanaka, in our land, or Kulaiwi, it also eliminates this idea that in kind of the Western world, queer is you're born this way, right? I just, here I am, and that's beautiful. But when we add that kind of, when you see in the special issue, the parentheses ED, queer, we're translating that to be that it's an action that kind of the cis world, right, cis heteronormative world, tells us and labels us as queer as something not of the norm. But when we say queer Kanaka, as you beautifully articulate, Kanaka are already queered in this settler world. Right? And then when we call ourselves queer again, it's a double queering. Right? And in that sense, we have to remember that these kinds of settler ways of thinking are the things that are queer. Our ike, our kuana ike oiwi, is what is actually norm, and we don't believe in those norms,
our center.
But they are the center. They are the ieve, the eve, the iwi of our aina.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start to just adopt the settler ways of even just kind of fitting into the world as queer, right? And forget that there's nuances to other ways of being that our ancestors thought about, then it's very easy to just kind of be absorbed, subsumed. Coercive colonialism is what you call it,
Coercive
right?
colonialism.
It's easy to just forget and be like, whoop, and then, yeah, I'm queer. But queered is, no. There's another entity out there that's calling us something and othering us from our own things. And I don't have an issue with people with Kanaka calling themselves queer, but we just have to be careful about being intentional with the word and knowing that it's a consistent action that that can have a consequence of separating us from the center of our people.
Absolutely.
Right?
And so Ākea brought this up. This is a good point, is that I guess when the Calvinist mission came to Hawaii,
oh yes,
our ways of being, our hula, our oli, mele, our relationality, sexuality, our le'a,
yes.
Were queered, right, by the church.
Yes.
So our people as a whole were queered and made to sort of conform to the ideals of settler sexual norms and societal norms, right?
And so conservatively modest and
but like conforming to this idea of the white sexual citizen as being the norm in a sense. That would be our ticket, right? In some way, shape, or form. And then moving into the present, right? Then there is, of course, the queer community, which has its own history of struggle on the continent and even in Hawaii.
Yes.
And its own history of power and organization and mana, and it's powerful and amazing and magical. But again, using that same lens and framework is problematic when sometimes it can be problematic.
Yes.
It's not to say Kanaka can't identify as queer.
No, not at all.
But I think the main point is to recognize, to have an understanding of the histories that gird these terms, right? And having an understanding of the genealogies and the power dynamics.
Yes.
Before having an informed understanding before we employ the words, right? I think that's really important. Not to say you can't identify as that or this and mea.
No, it's your life.
Of course, but and to recognize allyship in all of these relationships and to prioritize allyship. But just to be aware, right, of how we're using the word. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that's
know that there's nuances, and you articulate it beautifully. I'm in my own journey right now of just realizing, like, wow, okay, I just as my own lived experience, I feel like how I see the world, it aligns really closely with queer people that I went to school with, right, in America, around queer kids. I'm like, yeah, like I'm like them. But not understanding at the time that just because it, on the general of it, looks like, that's me, right? But then having a literacy to our own terms, understanding what you're saying, two very genealogies of like just completely different ways, and they're not always easy to equate and translate and be like, this is that and this is that.
They don't always translate, but they do intersect.
Absolutely.
They intersect, and that's important. That's where the Pilina building is in that,
where we can hold
threshold.
Space and move together.
Support each other, that sort of thing. That's really, really important.
Absolutely.
As well. I think sometimes when we want to assert our difference, we don't always leave room for our similarities. And our shared experiences.
Yes.
And I think we need to leave room for that. I think, especially moving forward, we're only stronger together.
Totally.
But I want to encourage people to think in more nuanced terms.
Yes.
In everything that they do. And I think this is just a lesson in nuance. It's not the be all end all, but just a lesson in how to think critically about these histories.
It's never black and white.
Never black and white, no.
She's gray.
She is. She's Filipino.
You're listening, there's gray curtains behind us if you don't know that. So there's so much nuance. You're going to find that out in all of the upcoming and surrounding episodes around, and we're learning as we go too.
Oh yeah.
We've learned a lot. We want to share any kind of a big momi you've learned since we've started this years ago?
A big momi that I've learned.
Big momi.
You're wearing the big momi today.
The momi aku, momi.
We just need to get you a bigger one.
Yeah. For every time I learn something, it's just going to get bigger. And bigger.
And then pretty soon your whole face will be covered with your momi.
Just kind things.
Yeah, period.
Okay. So big momi. What's been on your mind as we've been talking with different people?
I think what's been on my mind the most was something that Felicia Brown Acton shared in her reflection was that, you know, her center and her relationship to her people is to sit at the feet of her people. I think there's something missed in this time about that ability to just sit at one's feet like our elders' feet, right? Where we always hear the older generations talking about how they sat at their tutu's feet and they were silent and they listened and they absorbed. Even Hina talked about this in the oral history, how she would sit at her tutu's feet. And, you know, from that place, in a kind of a ha'a place, a place that is lower to the ground, you know, your perspective is different. And thinking about how you observe space, how you observe interactions between people, how you observe, you know, and listen and hear stories of our ancestors from that place. Sitting on the ground, sitting at the feet of our people is it's a forgotten pedagogical relationship, I would say.
Yes.
And, you know, Felicia also shared too that genealogy is the most important thing in the Pacific. Our genealogical connection to each other is the most important thing, and that you can't just, no mortal could ever sever your genealogical connection to your ancestors. And so for our brothers and sisters and themsters and mahu out there who have been kicked out and cast out of their family, you know, to recognize that their ancestors haven't turned their back on them. Right? That the mortals may think they can do that they can just say, you are no longer part of this family. But the reality is that that's not possible, right? Your kupuna will always be with you. You will always be connected at the piko and have that relationship with them. And they are always trying to communicate with you in some way, shape, or form. You just gotta be, you know, maka'ala to the signs, if you will.
Absolutely.
And you may be surprised that you may have inherited a lot of their traits, you know, a lot of their...
Yeah. A lot of my dad.
So that was, you know, those are some momis, if you will, from our
really
conversation. Yeah, What about you, Kea?
I kind of built off of that. So, in the sense that, and this is something I learned from our dear friend Kamalani, who has an episode with us, that when we talk about Ke Aloha Aina as the Ume Maganeti, he brings up there's a further future addition to...
Now, who wrote that?
Navahi. Navahi. And he talks about what is Ke Aloha Aina. It's the magnetic pull of our people to love our land and to protect it and to take care of it. But in a future article, he talks about why that is. And kind of brings up a interesting kupuna sense of like, Hapa Christian, Hapa Hawaii. And that's how a lot of people think. So he says that the Aina is our makuahine. And because Keakua, or the creator in his understanding, took soil from our Aina and created both Adam and Eve, that our bodies are basically manifestations of Aina itself. Right? So that to love our people is to love the land and vice versa. So I think I'm applying that to what you're saying about kupuna. We are the product of all of our kupuna's choices. From kupuna to makua to us. We are all of that in one vessel. To hulikua someone in your family because of how they see themselves, how they want to be out in the world in their kuleana, is to turn your back on your kupuna's choices because we are that extension, right, of Aina. Is to turn your back on Aina, right? That, I don't agree with how Oahu is presenting itself as the palilaumania of Lanihuli, right? I don't like that. So you sever that relationship only because it just exists as it exists. I think a lot of times when we have keiki, that they inherit all of these hiona of different generations past. But from aina to now, right, to just hulikua, a creation of your own, right? Your keiki reflects what you are. Mm-hmm. Whether they're kane, wahine, mahu, they are a combination set into a vessel, and how they present is how kupuna intended it to be with their kuleana. So I invite our lahui to start looking at people through their ku'ohau, right? And that's why we introduce ourselves and our guests with their aina and their kupuna, rather than talking about, in the colonial sense, me, you can't spell identity without I. I identify as, I am this, and I work at this, and I make this much, and all of the introduction in a colonial way is about me as the center of the universe, what I do, how much I make, and how I contribute to American capitalism. Then I can figure out everything, so I don't have to ask any more questions, right? But in a Hawaiian sense, I actually get to see you if I can see your makua kupuna networks. And how you continue their legacy through the kuleana in which they gave to you.
Yeah, and the aina too, right?
Right.
The aina being that conduit too.
You are a literal product of your aina, and just get literal here, because in the time that your makua hine is carrying you, the food that you get from that aina, right, becomes part of all the juices, right? All of that. So, and emotional too. But when we think about people just being people, kane wahine mahu, who are we to look at an iteration of aina itself and say, yeah, because you're presenting in this way, I'm not going to have, right? No, we cannot. Heolimeleikalani ka aina, he kaua ke Kanaka, right? And if we are aina itself, and that's all about ea and making sure that we ho'i ea and malama aina, we talk about all these buzzwords, right? But we need to start looking at every single person in the lahui as an iteration of the aina that they come from, and taking care of that.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Right? With their kuleana. That's all.
Yeah.
So shouldn't be any weirdness because we don't look at our islands like that.
Right.
Right? You have your favorite, you love kane'ohe, or you love, I don't know, waialua, right? But we are aina, and it's time to start taking care of it in that way, of us in that way. That's just one momi. Oh, hey, oi. Yeah. So there's so many momis in this season. Kamalani's going to be dropping some ike on us about...
Maile Arvin.
Yeah, Maile Arvin, Lani Teves, Heoli, talking about, co-creating this special issue. So many just bright people that are teaching us along the way. So,
and who are in community too.
Yeah.
Doing
they're
the
learning
work.
too along
They're
the way.
learning, they're doing, but they already carry with them such ike.
Yes.
So we're super honored and excited. I hope that, it's my hope that the lahui is makaukau for this. But
Can never tell.
But I feel like, it's time.
It is.
It is time to have these conversations on a larger scale with a farther reach as much as possible. And to really bring in people who carry and who are able to have those nuanced conversations into the room, to start to disseminate some of that ike in ways that can trickle into the community. I'm hoping that's what comes from this podcast and from the special issue.
Yep. And we cannot grow as a people if we are comfortable. Both in comfort of being around people that just think like you and there's no sense of challenge, and also the challenge to really unpack why I might feel uncomfortable about X, Y, and Z. If the conversation ends at a'ole pau ka'ike ka halau ho'okahi, that's my halau and your halau is different, that is always, and that's what Kahikina de Silva talks about, right? That we can't use that olo no e'o as just a period to end the conversation. But rather what you're talking about is looking at halau ike and the similarities and differences as a point of intersection of halavai, right? Where sky and earth meet, that halavai, we have to look at that place of connection and pilina rather than this is mine, this is yours, and we don't ever intersect. There's always going to be points of intersection, always. And I also encourage our listeners, our Lahui, to start looking at, right, these similarities and differences. Wherever the boundary is between two people where you feel like you're different, that's a point of connection.
Yeah.
And go from there. How can you build that rather than just always saying, well, that's just how I think, that's how you think, and we agree to disagree? Well, there's conversation there too to unpack, right? For example, with the word Māhūi.
Oh, yes.
Right? Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about the word Māhūi. So, I mean, I've seen so many mixed things about the word Māhūi. Let's unpack her a little bit.
Yeah, there's boxes.
There's boxes. I've seen mixed reviews about Māhūi. I didn't coin the term, but, you know, I heard it from a friend, Ruth Kake.
Oh, yes.
And I talk about this in my paper, Noka Māhūi Aloha, Unsettling Hetero /
Special issue of American Quarterly.
Yes.
People read it. It's a fabulous paper talking about
the origins of the Māhūi and how it's kind of trickled into the community.
Yes.
But, you know, it's the splicing of these two words, Māhū and Lahui. And I know Kumuhina doesn't care for the term, and she has every right to.
Absolutely.
And I definitely see her, understand what she's saying, that it just, in her mind and in her upbringing and her understanding, it is not in her understanding, it's not sort of epistemologically sound.
Yeah.
But, you know, in my reading of Mo'olelo, I've seen examples of the word Māhū and Lahui being placed in the same sentence. Particularly talking about the Lahui Māhū on Kauai, right? In Lauka'i'e. But also, I've seen Lahui Māhū as well, even though it would normally be switched around. I've seen it written that way in Mo'olelo. So, you know, the idea that Hawaiians didn't splice words together, I think, is not true. We definitely do splice words together to make things shorter, right? Do you have an example of a word that is spliced?
Splicing.
There's so many.
I mean, there's so many. It's hard. I'm trying to think. But, right, for a living language and convenience sake, we do this in English all the time, right? Contracting things, even in Olelo Kanaka Mani'ihau, right?
Nohona, for example.
Yeah, nohona. Yeah, we just put it together so that you don't always have to kind of put it out. And but I get the resistance to Māhūi being that, you know, in Dr. Lenny Basham's talking about Lahui is the La e hui ai ke Kanaka. You can't really say Kama e hui ai ke Kanaka. We're adding Māhū and Lahui. More a witty play on words rather than a functional grammatical thing.
And I think deeper than that, Hina's concern too is that she doesn't want to center Māhū as the experience. She wants to center Kanaka.
Let's unpack that.
And I do agree with her on centering, like how centering Kanaka is really important.
Yes.
You are Kanaka first in our Lahui. Māhū is just simply an adjective that describes you.
Yes.
However, we have seen, and I just saw a video the other day where two individuals were shredding apart a dear community member using the most vile vitriol, homophobic slurs in our Lahui about someone that we care about deeply.
Yes.
And it really breaks my heart. I think we are not there yet. We are not there where we can all be seen as being part of the Lahui.
No, we're not.
I think the Māhūi recognizes this. I think the word Māhūi recognizes this. It is an epistemological plug-in in a sense.
In Maka'ainana terms, what does that mean?
It's an orientation to our relationship in our community.
Yes.
That is rooted in Ike Hawaii, right? It is a recognition that we have not completely done the work yet as a community to really include everyone, right?
Right. On paper, Lahui is a safe space.
Lahui is a safe space. Because there will be people triggered when Kumuhina gets up there on stage and she serves her mana up there. People are very triggered. People are triggered when Coco is doing her thing.
Yep.
People are triggered when I do my thing.
Yes.
You know, we still experience hatred, even in our own community.
Especially when we're talking about palatability and being able to code switch. When we're in our own existence, that ku is this idea of being acceptable in a cookie cutter cis heteronormative, whatever, like, oh, that kane is super feminine, or vice versa, that wahine is very kane, or they dress in a certain way that doesn't equate to what my understanding of masculinity, femininity, you gotta be a brada, you gotta be a wahine, whatever that is.
I think deeper too, there's this sense of betrayal, I think, among heteronormative couples and people in general, that Māhū somehow betray the Lahui because we're not reproducing
the
Lahui.
Right.
I think that's screwed up, first of all. It's really bizarre thinking that comes from a colonial way of thinking about the nuclear family being the most important thing, reproduction of people within a capitalist system.
And the only valid way to live life.
The only valid way to live life. And in our history, Māhū did have keiki and do have keiki today and do reproduce the lahui.
Very ho'olu in different ways.
Yes. But the idea that they can't have keiki and they're somehow betraying the community is just bizarre to me.
Well, that even applies to what you quoted about Dr. Honey K. Trask, about how she was queered. In the,
she was
movement.
In her own words, her experience was that, within Lahui spaces, that she was queered for being a woman who chose at the time to be, childless, right? And it was seen as sort of a betrayal, or that there was this weird sort of idea about her and her place as a woman in Lahui spaces, that she wasn't fulfilling those things, and in fact she had a voice, right, which was like, oh my gosh.
Whoa, yeah.
It was the time too that she was demonized. Women were demonized for being in those places.
Queered, right? Even queered. In their own space.
Definitely queered, right? Called a lesbian, right? Or thought of being as lesbian.
Right, she has a husband, but
right.
How dare you?
How dare you? How dare you not have keiki and stuff like that. But I think, the word Māhūi is just, you can hate it or you can love it.
Sure.
But I've really worked with this word, theorized around this word in a way that I hope will allow us to recognize this issue, that we are not fully seen. We are not always in conversations around
not fully integrated, where it's
our
just
lives aren't. It's just Kanaka, and our experience and the hatred toward us should be put on the side and not talked about in Lahui spaces in order for us to holomua. Because we need to focus on holomua versus issues and pilikia and our disharmony in certain ways, shapes, form. So I hope that we can see Kumuhina's perspective and mahalo it and honor it. And I hope we can see other authors and scholars and community members, their perspective
build on
the
it,
term Māhūi, and see, and be critical, but also recognize the genealogies of those ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
Looking at a kahua and knowing where we can pani haka haka. Right now we're just doing pohaku niho, the first stones that niho into the ground. And that's what kupun have done for us, where we fill in stones where there were gaps. And that's kind of the Hawaiian perspective of always building, always filling in, making it stronger. And right now with this kind of theory about Māhūi, you're doing that niho work, and more people can get on board and feel like, okay, where are the gaps where we can kind of add nuance and things that we're not seeing too. Can I add to that conversation? So in talking about Māhūi, I think you articulated well in your paper, but looking at, right on paper, that we're all Lahui, we're all Kanaka, and I understand the resistance sometimes of being like, oh, if you focus on being Māhū, it already starts to queer us again, right? And I wanted to remind us that when we talk about Lahui, that's everyone, and that Māhūi is within that circle, not outside of it.
It's not outside.
No, we're not trying to other ourselves and say we're not part of it. We're saying we are in it, as Lahui, and then Māhū in it, but we have to insist and remind people that until the hatred and vitriol and things we've inherited from other settler systems, until we start to unpack that, dismantle it, and really have hard conversations on it, then we can move into a future of, yes, Kanaka first. But right now in our society, I don't even know if people can articulate that I am Kanaka first and I identify by my kuleana. Right now, there's so many of our people that identify, again, with how much they make, what's their job, how many cars, get gold chain, right? All kinds of stuff, right? All of these capitalist monikers, if that's the word, about that I'm succeeding in the American society that we're dealing with. No fault of our own, no fault of anyone who does that. But until we actually have real literacy and articulation of, yes, that first, and renormalizing that, then I think Māhūi doesn't necessarily need to serve it in the same way that we do. But it's an insistence.
Perhaps there will be a day where Māhūi becomes irrelevant.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
That would be awesome.
That would be great in some way, sometime in the future.
Sure.
But again, you know, our sisters out there, they're in danger.
Yes.
They are in danger in many ways. They're strong, but you know, that to me is a ho'ailona, if you will, of the health of our pilina with each other. And so I make in my paper I talk about this, the American Quarterly issue, a sort of a reorienting to Kanaka modes of relationality as a way out of these colonial logics that center the settler's sexual citizen, who is often framed after a white individual.
Absolutely.
Right? To move us away from that and to, as I think about it in a sense, rebuild the Hawaiian family, where the Hawaiian family was completely collapsed, right? With the coming of missionaries. Not all Hawaiian families collapsed, but the nuclear family becoming the centerfold of society, outcast people like Mahu who are in these families. The extended family no longer had the same sort of pilina anymore. Right? And these different family units started to spring up around. Even though Hawaiians resisted that, and we see examples of that, like my family, for example, resisted the nuclear family model in many ways.
So,
And so, you know, I had the unique perspective of seeing, you know, being raised by many different aunties and uncles and seeing them as parents to me, right? And then also them seeing me as Mahu and not being an issue.
It's totally,
in fact, something that benefits the family, right?
Right.
But not all families maintain that pilina in the same way. And so rebuilding the Hawaiian family is also looking at our other kinship relationships and reconnecting that pilina in a way that incorporates and recognizes the value of Mahu, human relationships, other than human relationships,
more than human
within the family unit, or within the family regime, if you will, matrix.
You bring up a good point, because I think sometimes when we just hear sexuality, gender, intimacy, erotics, you just think, oh, okay, this is about what's between your legs, it's about who you like, orientation. But what you're bringing up is a sense of queering how kupuna related, right? It's queer, as you know, in someone else's eyes, for a grandparent to raise their child's hiapo, their first thing. That's unheard of, you know, because nowadays this is my kid. Like, my parents can't tell me what I'm going to do with my kid, right? But for us, that's actually an honor to build the relationship of a kupuna and a mo'opuna, where kupuna are heading to po, and mo'opuna just came from po. You are actually building that relationship where kupuna that are before them have a message that the mo'opuna are giving, right? And that kupuna are training their mo'opuna to be ready to, right, live in this realm. And for us to sever that, just to say that this is my kid, right? Not to say that that's bad, but there's just so many nuances where we don't understand how much we've adopted without realizing how different those two worlds are.
Yeah. It truly breaks my heart, because it is truly an LP in this time. I think in terms of relationships with our family, there's a lot of this, you know, severing relationships, withholding children. And you know, for some people, there are very good reasons why they're doing that.
Sure, of course. Mental health is
super important. Sometimes parents don't deserve to be in your life. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's absolutely. But
right.
I think also at the same time there's this I think a stinginess too. There's a weaponizing of relationality in ways that people get what they want by wielding a child over a grandparent.
Yes.
In ways like that. I've seen it.
Yeah,
I mean, I've seen it happen in my own family.
We don't want to be P as in stingy. We want to be P as in...
And P.
Yeah. Just serve it, right? So, but that's a symptom, right, of American capitalism, right? To be stingy and have a lot, right? And in that way is like, I'm good, right? I can flex that. Instead of being like, the more I can give,
putting the
more work. Yes. The more work I can put out to other people, that's the Kanaka way, and two very, very different systems.
Yeah.
It's no fault of anyone to assimilate or to want to succeed in the American formula, right? We have to pay our bills. We got to pay the
bills.
We got to
get coin.
But we have a kuleana now as Kanaka to build our own literacy so that we can at least know why things are happening the way they do and not just say, I don't know, this is how it is.
We have a kuleana. That is the most important thing, kuleana.
Yep.
And I know Kamalani will talk about this.
Absolutely, economies of kuleana.
So, I mean, beyond Māhūi, beyond erotic sexuality, gender, we're also going to be talking about ike kupuna and, ancestral ways of connecting to one another. We're going to be talking about ancestral ways of teaching. We're going to be talking about
consent.
Ancestral ways of consent. We're going to talk about histories of dispossession. We're going to talk about histories of reclamation and resurgence. And I think not limiting ourselves to, gender sexuality and the politics that come from that, I think is also very Kanaka, because all things are relevant and woven together.
They all have touching points.
They all have touching points. They all relate to each other. And so to be able to broaden that conversation, I think is going to be really vai to our listeners and to our lahui.
Yep.
So I think in closing...
Let's close it up.
Pani.
Pani.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to...
Gosh, I mean, that would be like another hour.
It would, because we can always talk for days.
What I think we'll close with is listeners, viewers out there, what we hope, right? What we kind of want to get out of it is for you to feel like there's a safe space, right? You come to our hale aloha, basically, to learn, to kipa, to kanikapila, to cry, to just feel like you're seen. And for so long, we've been meaning to have a hale for people to just come and be. Yeah. Be those tutu ladies that were like, hey,
we want to be the mama
come.
nuis. We are mama nuis, but come to our hale, come eat, come talk story. Let's sit at each other's feet and
malama aina
in that way.
Sit at your kupuna and sit at the feet of your aina. Humble yourself to know that to show what we don't know, in terms of Kamalani talking about the whole papa, right? To just say, I don't know, but I want to learn. If we come from that place rather than competitive, like, I know, and how do you know, like, who you? But that is the defense mechanism, right? That's the defense, like, I have to survive in this society.
It is.
I'm a fighter and we gotta. But this podcast is turn off survival mode.
Yeah.
Come sit at the feet, and we're going to sit at your feet, and just to learn.
Yeah.
Just because we're the hosts and creators or whatever, we're learning.
We are learning every day. We're going to learn so much throughout this season. We all are going to learn so much throughout this season. So season 1 is going to be following Hūlili. Super excited. And
we'll more to that later. More seasons. I
already have ideas in the head.
Give us 5 stars on the rating and subscribe and comment. And as Kupuna would do the new Peppa, if we're missing something and you want to contribute, hit us up.
Write us. Right? But hate speech will not be tolerated.
No hate speech.
No hate speech.
Constructive criticism.
All constructive criticism.
Right?
But we encourage you to share your mana'o with aloha.
Yeah. Welcome to Kūkā
Kīkī.
Kīkī.
Kūkā. Kīkī.
All right. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Mahalo nui for sipping the tea on Kūkā Kīkī. Until next time, e inu I ka wai I ke kupuna, a e hoʻohainu I ka waha moʻopuna. Aloha.